Okay, it is recording. Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well on this Tuesday evening or whatever day and time it is for you. This is our fourth session on teaching foreign languages. So, as per always, very excited to be here. Live people that are watching, hello, hope you're doing well. And then people watching the recording, also hello to you and hope you are doing well as well. Today's going to be a little bit of a shorter session, a little bit shorter than usual. Primarily, well, it might actually end up being the usual length, but I suspect it might go a little bit short. Um, I have a crazy busy week ahead of me. Very, very long nights. I've been going to bed at like later than 1 in the morning, just getting some things done for work. It's not always like that, thankfully, but this week is very, very busy. So I'm gonna try and get through this a little bit faster than usual. That way I can get an extra maybe 20 minutes to work on some of my things and sleep a little bit earlier. So it's our fourth session. If you want to see the first 4 sessions, they're recorded. They're in our YouTube playlist. Maybe I'll put a link in the YouTube description below for people that want to see the rest of the sessions if you're looking for them. For the live people, maybe just at the end, if you want me to share the link with the others, I can share the link with you and you can watch them. So today we're going to talk about what to teach first when you're teaching foreign languages. Agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to talk about what to teach first in order. Then we'll have a Q&A and discussion at the end, which is not recorded. And as I said, today will be a much shorter session. I'll do a very, very fast introduction on me. I mean, the live people, most of you know me, but there's a couple new people. And if you're watching this, you likely know who I am already, but just in case. I'm from Calgary. I really like learning languages. I speak quite a few. I speak English, French, Spanish, Mandarin, and then my mother tongue, which is Gujarati. I majored in languages in university, graduated in 2014, love traveling. One of the big reasons why I like language learning is that I travel a lot. I've been to 15 different countries and over 100 cities across the globe. Teaching is also a big passion too. So I've been teaching foreign languages for a number of years now, I've been learning them for since my teenage years. I've been very, very interested in that for a long time. And then teaching has been a big part of my life too. So my mom's a teacher. I've grown up in the teaching in a household with a teacher. In my previous line of work was running a window cleaning business where a big part of my job was teaching, coaching, teaching and coaching different people on different skills, whether it's how to clean windows or sales or marketing or finances or event planning. Like I was teaching so many different things. And it was a huge part of my role at the window cleaning business. So very, very quick intro on me in case you don't know who I am. So let's dive right into the steps. I've listed out, I believe it's 5 steps. Let me double check. Is it 5? 4 steps, 4 initial steps. And these will translate across all, if not most, languages. So if someone's a pure beginner, I like to start with the alphabet and the sounds of the language. So for example, if you're teaching Spanish, I like to start with going through the alphabet. How do you pronounce A, B, C, D, E, F? Like how is F pronounced? F. How do you pronounce C? Well, C can be pronounced one of 2 ways. The letter C in Spanish could be a K, as in the word creo. It could also be a S, as in the word ciruela, right? If you're in Spain, the S becomes a Th, right? So going through the alphabet, the sounds of the language, giving lots of example words, having the student repeat the sounds and the words, and trying to help them get familiarized with the alphabet and the sounds of the language. Now, certain languages, such as Mandarin, doesn't necessarily have an exact alphabet per se, but they still do have sounds, right? They still have, for example, pinyin, right? So you still do have all the different initials and the finals and the sounds that exist in the language. So even though there isn't an alphabet exactly, there still are sounds that have to be taught. And I do like to start with that, right? In Mandarin as well, you have tones, right? There's a difference between whatever, like the stereotypical example is like ma, 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 right? That's a stereotypical example, but I do like going through the sounds of the language first. My personal perspective is my personal perspective on the alphabet and sounds of the language when I'm teaching it is unless specifically requested by the student, I spend enough time on it for the student to sound acceptable, but I do not care if they sound perfect. I want them to sound okay and fine. And when they speak, I understand them. It's not crazy wrong. That's my personal default. The exception being if the student has specifically requested or specifically showing an interest in really liking the alphabet and sounds. So if you teach me, I love pronunciation. And you better go really in depth about pronunciation with me. And I will ask you so many questions, and we will spend so many classes on pronunciation. But I find generally out of the thousands, maybe not thousands, but maybe at least 1,000, maybe 1,000, maybe more, at least 1,000 people that I've either talked to or worked with in terms of language learning. The vast majority of them tend to not care if they sound perfect. They just want to sound good and be understood. So that's my general default, per se, in terms of how deeply I will teach alphabet and the sounds of the language. I'll then transition into basic phrases. So basic phrases, I'll give you some examples. Hello, goodbye, thank you, please, good morning, good afternoon, my name is, where is blah, 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 how much does this cost? Think about the types of phrases you would see in a phrase book. If you're traveling to another country, often people buy those phrase books and there's different phrases in the phrase books. Perhaps nowadays people don't buy phrase books anymore because we have the internet, but prior to the internet, people bought phrase books. So think about the phrases you would see in a phrase book, and I will start to cover some of those phrases. When we're doing those phrases, I will always put a little bit of an emphasis on the pronunciation. So when they mispronounce something, let's say we have the word, and let's take a Spanish example, for instance, and we have the word, maybe I'll type it on the screen. We have a word such as hola. Maybe the person says hola, right? This would be a great opportunity to jump in and say, yeah, it's actually pronounced hola, because remember, H's in Spanish are not pronounced. They're silent. We don't pronounce H's. So it's actually pronounced like hola and not hola. So I will take this as an opportunity to reinforce some of the things that we learned in the alphabet and the sounds of the language portion. And this is typically the second thing I teach. Usually, alphabet and the sounds of the language, depending on the language, can take a very long time, and it might take a very short period of time. So I'll give an example. Spanish, I usually am able to teach the alphabet sounds of the language within 1 to 2 hours. 1 to 2 hours, I can take you through and get you to a point where you sound acceptable and you have a general understanding of the alphabet and the sounds within a couple of hours. But if we look at, for example, French, it's a lot harder. So French, in fact, this is a really great point, actually. French pronunciation and the sounds are a lot more complex. And so usually what ends up happening is, yes, we do an initial look, an initial study of the alphabet and sounds, but probably for the first months of classes, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, we are always referring back to alphabet pronunciation, looking at different letter combinations, and going a little bit deeper into the sounds of the language, because there's so much to look at, right? There's so much to look at. And so often for French, we look at the sounds, we look at the alphabet, but we don't go super in depth early on. We slowly build, right? So even though I start with this, we don't necessarily look at everything immediately because there's so much information. Mandarin's another example. Mandarin, whenever I work with people in Mandarin, I don't do it too much because I'm still learning myself. So Mandarin is the minority of things that I teach, but still, even when I do, tones is something I don't put a huge emphasis on tones early on. Not early on, unless they have a good ear and they really seem to get it quickly. I do focus on tones a little bit, but I don't care if they're perfect. I will work with them and slowly work on the tones, but really put an emphasis much later on it because, there's just a lot, there's so much when it comes to Mandarin pronunciation that we just don't have in English or French or many other languages. So it's, yeah, maybe it's something that's worth noting. I don't necessarily teach all pronunciation in one lesson or 2 lessons. Sometimes it takes me many months of consistently revisiting it to really help them understand. So we have step 1, alphabet. Step 2, we have basic phrases. Step 3, self-introductions. So I want someone to be able to say, my name is, I'm from this country, I do this for work, I have 4 kids, their names are this, this, and this, they are studying in this school, they, I don't know, they play sports, my parents live in Calgary, but they're actually from Africa, or they're from the UK, and on, like just basic self-introductions. Like if you were to say, go talk for 4 minutes and tell me about you and your family, they could do that for 4 minutes, or 3-4 minutes, something like that. When I teach self-introductions, it's also, there's certain grammar points that might come into it. Like they might need to know a little bit of grammar. They might need to understand the fact that the present tense conjugates like this, right? They might need to know how to form a question. Like, for example, if let's take Mandarin, for instance, right? In Mandarin, if I'm going to ask you, like, are you Canadian, right? In Mandarin, you have to understand that in Mandarin, yes, no questions finish in a ma, right? Ma, it finishes in ma. 你是加拿大人吗? Like, you have to understand that it finishes in ma. So we're going to have to go through that grammar concept so you understand, what's this ma, 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 ma? Where is that coming from? And you understand. Or in French, right? If anytime you're talking about self-introductions, nobody ever just stands there and talks about themselves for 4 minutes. Usually, you're having a bit of a conversation. Someone says, what's your name? And you say, oh, my name is Azren. What's your name? The other person says, oh, I'm Jack. Nice to meet you. Oh, nice to meet you too, Jack. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from Japan. Where are you from, Azren? Oh, I'm from Canada, but actually my family's from India. Oh, India. Have you been to? There's some conversation that happens within that self-introduction, right? It's not just someone standing up and introducing themselves. So there's certain grammatical points that might come up, and it's dependent on every language. Every language will be different on what those grammar points are. But this now becomes the third thing I heavily focus on. And that actually bleeds into our fourth point. Really, 3 and 4 kind of go together, to be honest with you, which are called conversation building blocks. And this is where I've listed out some building blocks, but it's going to be different for every language. So asking questions is a key, right? You might need to look at past, future, and present tenses, right? Looking at likes and dislikes and other common verbs. Like I might say, I like to hike. Oh, I hike every week, right? Hiking is a verb, so you have to understand that verb, perhaps. Sentence structure might be something you have to look at when you're doing these conversations, because maybe the word order is different in your language, right? Maybe it's not exactly the same. So maybe, for instance, if we look at French, right? If I want to say my name is, I would say je m'appelle. Well, you have to have some form of understanding of what does je m'appelle actually mean? Well, je means I. M'appelle doesn't mean like my name. It's actually not at all. It's I myself call Azren, if you were to translate it word per word, right? Spanish, similar. Me llamo Azren, or and on and on and on and on and on, right? So you might need to look at, in my mother tongue, Gujarati, maru naam Azren che. It's like, now it's my name Azren is. So you might need to look a little bit at sentence structure, so so the students have some concept of what's going on. And that might be something you have to look at. And then the last thing I've written here is repeating the same conversations every class. So a great formula that I follow in my classes, and really all of our teachers, it's a very good formula we follow. Once you've taught a concept, grammar concept, conversation concept, anything, right? Whatever it is, pronunciation, or whatever the heck you've taught something, you've taught the theory, you've done practice exercises, the students have done some homework, you've done a lot of focus on this one thing. if you've ever learned another language and you've taken classes, you know how it is. Just because you learn something in class and you've done practice exercises, it doesn't mean you actually know it. It doesn't mean you can actually do it. It doesn't mean you can actually use that knowledge in the real world. And in my opinion, one of the problems in many language classes is that when you finish a chapter, you simply move on to chapter 2, even though people don't really know chapter 1. And so what's the answer? Well, some people might say, well, I can't move to chapter 2 until I really know chapter 1 really well. Well, that's not very practical, is it? Because then you're just reviewing the same content over and over and you're not progressing. That makes no sense. You can't just you can't review chapter 1 for 7 years. That doesn't make any sense. So instead, my personal view is, if you have a 1-hour class, let's say it's a private, it's private or group, doesn't really matter actually. The first 15 minutes of that class is going to be spent on reviewing or practicing what you just finished learning. So if you spent 3 lessons, let's say you did alphabet, sounds of the language, and you've done basic phrases. Let's say you've gotten through these. Let's say it's Spanish. Spanish alphabet is not too complex. You've done some basic phrases. Maybe there's a little bit of questions they know. They know how to say my name is, what's your name. You've learned a little bit. Now, the first 15 minutes of every class, you're going to ask them, hola, ¿cómo estás? Oh, ¿y cómo te llamas? Oh, ¿de dónde eres? ¿Eres canadiense? Where are you from? Hi, what's your name? How are you doing today? Every class you repeat it so that you're always getting a little bit of a review of what they were just learning. And then the remaining, 45 minutes, hour and 15 minutes, however long the class is, now you focus on the new stuff. So the first 15 minutes is always review, and then you move on to other stuff. So they're consistently getting that practice with old content. When I repeat these same concepts, or when I do that review, I suppose, in that 15 minutes every time, I try to switch it up. I try to do it in different ways. It's not always the same order of questions, the same thing. So I'll give you an example. Let's go back to these, let's say we did self-introductions. They now can talk a little bit about themselves. Every class, I'll ask them different things about themselves, but I won't ask in the same order. Or I might switch up my wording. So instead of saying, where are you from? In one class, I might say, oh, are you from Canada? Instead of saying, where are you from? Or instead of asking, maybe for 4 weeks in a row, I kept asking them, the first thing I asked them was, where are you from? Maybe in week 5, instead of saying, where are you from? The first question I asked them is, oh, so is your family from here? All of a sudden, it breaks the pattern, and it still makes them listen and think and everything. So that's something that I'll always do. It's worth noting, maybe I should have said this in the beginning, that might have made more sense. This tends to be, this whole system, these 4 basic things that we talked about: alphabet, basic phrases, self-introductions, and conversation building blocks. This is for adults. Children will not always follow all this structure that I've talked about. It's not the same. It really is not the same. It's quite different for children. It's not necessarily going to be that way. I'll make a whole separate presentation on it one day, but maybe I'll do a quick little rant on it now. Like, I just taught a class on yesterday, a group of 3 children, ages 4 and 5, so super young. And here's the thing, online. So imagine that. Kids have to figure out, parents are helping, but kids are there. They have to understand, they have to look at the camera. They have to understand, they have to listen. They have to keep their attention. Like, it's, super challenging. Could you imagine? Just like, literally one boy would run away from the computer. He would run away. He would leave. I'm like, yo, come back. Come back. Where'd you go? One girl, I thought she couldn't hear me the whole time because she wouldn't talk. Like, she would just stare at the freaking computer. She would just stare. And I'm like, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Mom? So-and-so's mom, are you there? Can you hear us? And then mom, I don't know where she was at the time. The first few times, she didn't even come to the computer. And I was like, oh, great. Stuck at this 4-year-old who's just looking at the computer screen. I have no idea if she can even hear me. One girl decides to jump on the bed halfway through the class. So all that, like, at the end, it's craziness. Like, their behavior, they're not badly behaved kids. They're kids. They're 4. They're young. They're little, right? So at the end of the class, they're literally, like, we were going through some animals, which I wasn't sure if we're going to do that. We just got to animals because one of the kids loved to talk about animals. And then I'm like, okay, vaca. Like vaca is cow in Spanish. And then one of the boys decides that he's going to go vaca, 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 vaca. And now the kids think this is hilarious and they're laughing. So now we ended up playing a game going vaca, 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 vaca. Shh. Then we say stop. Then they're all quiet and they're like giggling. And then we did gato for cat. Gato, 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 gato. And then I think it's hilarious. I had no idea that was going to happen. I had no clue that was going to happen, but we had to go down that route. And if I tried to reroute us back to alphabet and sounds of the language, that would not have gone well. There's no way that would have gone well. It just wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked. So kids are a little different. There is still a structure to follow for kids, but maybe I'll cover that another time because it's a different presentation altogether. Anyway, so that concludes the recorded portion of this. Again, if you're watching this recorded, I'll put a link if you want to join us live ever. Maybe I'll put it in the YouTube description or I'll put it somewhere where you can find it. So I'll stop the recorded portion. Then we'll go to the question and answer and any discussion. Talk to you guys later, and recording people, goodbye.